Hi, this is Emily Jones from Madison Metropolitan Sewers District, and in this demo, I'll walk you through how to access and fill out the online annual Amalgam certification form. So the reason for this demonstration is because we're moving to this online form, which is hosted as an online survey, away from the paper forms that we've used in the past, just to be more efficient. And so this is intended for staff at dental clinics who are responsible for amalgam reporting, so they can become familiar with this new form. So to access this form, we'll send out an email link to the report. So check your email to make sure you got this newsletter email. If you didn't, let us know and we'll make sure to get your contact information into that list so you'll receive correspondence related to amalgam reporting in the future. Now, this email newsletter will pull in information that's specific to your clinic. So mine, for the sake of this example, says to the staff of MMSD test site. That's my test clinic, but that will pull in your clinic name. This email will also pull in a unique clinic PIN, which is used to pull information into your survey form and to make sure that we're collecting information for the right clinic. So if you manage multiple locations in our area, then you'll have multiple PINs because each one of those locations needs to have a separate individual report completed. But regardless of how many locations that you manage, you'll have a report link. And so you can access the online form by just clicking this link. And it'll start loading. It might take a couple moments, so just wait a few seconds for this screen to appear. So you can see a few mechanics about the survey. This is through a platform called Survey 123. You'll see where you are in the survey with this status bar on the bottom right that says page 0 of 8, or whichever page you're on. It'll tell you how far you are through the survey. You'll enter your PIN in this first field once you're ready to go. And that will pull in information about your clinic. So you can see my MMSD test clinic is automatically pulled in for the clinic name. That clinic name should pull in automatically for your clinic as well. If you need to go back, so let's say you entered in the wrong PIN and the wrong clinic name came up, or you want to double check the instructions, use these buttons down on the bottom left, the back and next buttons, to move between the pages in this form. If you use your browser's back button, you're just going to close right out of this form. Luckily, the survey has improved recently, so the browser will store your responses if you accidentally close out of the survey, but it's still best to do this all at one point so you know where you are in the survey and you can have all that information in front of you as you're completing the certification. But if you needed to reset it for any reason, you could go to this reset link up in the upper left, and that will take out any information that you've already entered. So that's an option to you. But I'm just going to cancel out of that because I want to keep completing this form. And I'm not going to go into detail about each one of the questions that are asked in this form because we have some additional resources that explain the background of the amalgam certification, mercury minimization, and the Wisconsin Dental Association best management practices, a lot of which are covered in this certification. And so if you are looking for any clarification on the terminology, if you aren't sure what one of these questions about a practice means, then I would highly encourage you to go check out the training material that we have on the Pollution Prevention for Dental Clinics website on madsewer.org. And I'll show you that before the end of this demonstration. But this demo assumes that you already are familiar with all these practices, already familiar with the annual certification, and this is just showing you what to expect as you fill yours out. So as I mentioned, we're going to pull in information to this form that we have on file for your clinic. And so in subsequent years, if there are details about your clinic that don't change very much from year to year, so obviously your clinic name or your street address, that will just be pulled in for you, so you don't have to go to the trouble of updating this or to filling this in from scratch. That said, if anything has changed, you still can edit these fields that have been auto-populated. So I could change this to just MMSD if there'd been a name change, or if it's still the same information, just leave it as it is. If there's an asterisk next to a field name that you can see here, that means that the field is required. And so you can't advance to the next page or submit the survey without putting something in that field. So if I pressed enter and moved on and pressed next, I would get this little error message that the survey contains one error. Press here to navigate to the error, so I can click this bar at the top, and that'll take me to the field that has an error in it so I can fix it. So in this case, this is a required question, but it was blank, and so I need to fill in, this is Emily J, I'm a pollution prevention specialist. And you can see that the email address and phone number have automatically pulled in as well. The email address, I particularly want you to take a look at and make sure that that is the right address, because this email is going to receive not only correspondence related to this annual certification, but any other dental updates that we're going to have in the future. So that newsletter that I sent out that had the survey link in it for this year, that was based on the most recent email addresses that we had on file for all of the clinics in our service area. And so this could go to your compliance manager, to your practice manager, whoever is the point person at your clinic for amalgam compliance related matters. So just make sure that that is up to date. And then before we finish this first page of questions, there's an optional question. So you can tell it's optional because there isn't an asterisk after the field name. But just to give you an idea of why we're asking some of these optional questions, part of the Sewerage District's mercury minimization program is identifying additional sources of mercury in the sewer system so we can better target our efforts to reducing mercury there. And so the reason we're asking about the age of clinics or the year that clinics were founded is to figure out where there might be historical mercury in the sewer system. So in recent years and recent decades, there have been improvements in how dental clinics are managing their amalgam, which is great. And we've seen a decrease in mercury at the treatment plant after amalgam requirements went in. But as amalgam was used more prevalently back in previous decades, and there may not have been as stringent control measures in place, there could have been mercury that ended up in the sewer system below that location. And so this is really just an indicator for the sewers district where we still might be getting mercury contributions from historical amalgam use in dental clinics that have been at a location for a while. So I want to stress this has no bearing on your compliance as a clinic. So this isn't tied, the age of your clinic isn't something that's tied to your mercury requirements. This is just informational to the district. So that said, I encourage you to put in this if this isn't already known by the district, if this wasn't automatically pulled into this form. This is helpful for us to know, so enter that in if you know it. But if you don't know it, you can go ahead and leave that blank and you'll be able to still proceed to the next page. So the next page you come to is going to ask you about your use of amalgam in your clinic and the best management practices that are required and how you're following them. This first set of questions just ask how you're using amalgam in your clinic. And so you can select all that apply. So if you place new amalgam fillings, select place. If you remove existing amalgam fillings, select remove, and so on. You can uncheck those if you accidentally click one. This last answer, this clinic does not place or remove amalgam fillings except in infrequent unplanned situations. This is going to be a rare response in our service area for the clinics in MMSD's program. This might be relevant if a clinic that you are responsible for has stopped using amalgam, has phased it out. But if you're scheduling services that involve amalgam, so placing new fillings or removing existing fillings, and they're happening beyond just unplanned emergency situations, then don't select this option, select one of these. Because even if it's pretty rare, but it's still a routine occurrence at your clinic, then that would fall under the categories of removing or placing new amalgam fillings. So the reason we have this last response is because if that were the case, your clinic would be exempt from local and federal amalgam management requirements because the generation of amalgam waste would be so rare. But for the rest of this form, I'm just going to focus on these more common situations, these top three options. As you select these options, it's going to affect the questions that appear later on, because some practices only are relevant if you use amalgam a certain way. So for example, if you place new amalgam fillings, then you'll get questions later on in this form about how you're handling the used capsules from mixing the new fillings, but that clearly isn't relevant if you don't place new amalgam fillings, and so if you only select remove, those questions won't appear. So that's how your answers here will affect the rest of your form. For the sake of demonstrating this form, I'm going to select this clinic places new amalgam fillings, removes amalgam fillings, and extracts teeth that contain amalgam fillings. Once again, we have some optional questions that appear. This, again, is just informational to the sewers district about the extent that amalgam is still being used and therefore mercury waste is being generated in our service area. It's kind of a picture into how much mercury we can still expect from dental clinics at the wastewater plant. So this doesn't have any bearing on your compliance, but is still helpful to MMSD, so please answer that to the degree you can. And then we'll move on to the best management practices that are related to the amalgam uses in your clinic that you answered above. This is grouped in this form by the assumed or the approximate location of these practices to help you kind of run down that checklist and check these practices off based on their proximity in your clinic. This may not be one-to-one to how things are organized in your clinic. And so you might have an amalgam collection container in an exam room, for instance, instead of your storeroom. But this is a rough way to generalize where these practices would take place that you can check on. When we get into these best management practice questions, they're mostly yes/no questions. So are you compliant or not? Or are you following this practice or not? So again, I'm not going to go into the next ones in great detail just to save time and because additional resources exist to explain these practices. So this is assuming you understand all these practices and you can answer them to the best of your knowledge. So there are a few free text fields that you'll come across in the certification. And so one is the name of the vacuum line cleaner used. And the specific type of line cleaner that you use isn't related to your compliance, but it's the chemical properties of the line cleaner to make sure that it's going to be safe for your amalgam separator and it's not going to dissolve mercury out of amalgam. And so we still want to know what type of line cleaner is used just so we can verify that the chemical properties are in line with the requirement. So I can say, make it up, Nutricel. And then I'll get a question about the pH of the vacuum line cleaner. Now moving on to another area or approximate area of your clinic where practices would be taking place, you'll get some questions about what's going on in exam rooms. So for instance, as you're removing amalgam fillings and generating contact amalgam, are those pieces disposed of as amalgam waste in an amalgam collection container? If anything didn't seem to quite capture what's going on at your clinic, and so if you want to add any clarification to any of your answers above, because they are just those yes/no answers, you can add some comments in this field at the bottom of the page. But if you don't have anything to add, then you don't have to put anything in this field. You can just leave it blank and move on. And here we ask questions about your amalgam separator or your other amalgam waste collection device in your plumbing and how you're maintaining that. You can see that this question was automatically filled in for me because this was in my record for this test clinic that I'm filling out the form for. And so if we know from previous interactions with your clinic that you have an amalgam separator, this will automatically be filled in for you. But again, this is another case where you can make changes if something has changed since the last time that you submitted your report or the last time that we from the district came in and inspected your clinic. But if that's still accurate, just leave it checked. And because amalgam separator is checked, there'll be a section for collecting information about the separator and its maintenance. So again, we'll automatically pull on the branded model if we have that on file for your clinic. We'll ask if you can see the contents of the amalgam separator's collection canister because that will affect the photo verification of your separator's maintenance. So in the case of this example, yes, you can see the inside. So that will cause a question to appear that's asking for a picture of your separator. So instead of in-person inspections of your separator, which we used to do in the past, we're asking for you to take a picture of your separator so we can get that same verification without having to physically visit your clinic. And so this is beneficial for both saving travel and gas, and in the year of COVID, this is preventing in-person interactions. And so you can take this photo either in real time. If you have a camera on the device that you're completing the certification on, you could click this camera icon. If you don't, you can just upload an image file that you've already uploaded to your computer. So say you took a picture of your separator with your phone and uploaded that to your computer that you're completing the certification on, you can just find that file. So I'll bring in my picture here. And then if I want to expand that just to double check that it came out right, I can click on it. You can see it gets bigger. You can see in this picture that you can pretty well see the sedimentation line. So that's a decent picture of a separator to show that it's not getting too full. And I can X out to minimize that again. If you wanted to, this is totally optional. You can click this little text icon and rename this. You don't have to, because when you submit this report, the picture that's associated with it will be pulled in with that report in basically a bundle. And so it should be correlated to your clinic so we know whose separator this is. But if you wanted to, you can change the name or change the name to your clinic. It's up to you. You'll be asked about how often you're checking the fullness and the function of the separator. And then you just click this little field to bring up a calendar to indicate hopefully the exact date, but the approximate date at the very least, the last time that separator's collection container or equivalent canister for collecting amalgam waste, if you have a different device, was changed out. Here's another example of a conditional question. So this is asking if your vacuum pump has a filter on it that collects debris from the pump. And then there's a little bit of help text here to help you understand what to look for if this question doesn't make sense. Again, you can also find more information in the training modules on the Dental Pollution Prevention webpage. So if I say no, nothing appears. If I say yes, another question appears that asks me if the contents of that filter are disposed of as amalgam waste according to requirements. Now on page 5 of 8, you'll be asked about other pollutants. And I want you to understand that these are not tied to your compliance. And so don't be alarmed about your answers to these as related to your mercury amalgam requirements. These are more recommendations, or these are guiding recommendations that we want all clinics in our service area to be following, just to follow the best practice of keeping as many pollutants out of the sewer system as possible if there's an alternative disposal route. And so there's a lot of conditional questions on this page, similar to that vacuum pump filter question, where if you select a certain practice or some certain substances used in your clinic, then you'll get some additional questions to ask about your disposal of those substances. So for instance, if I say all my x-rays are digital, nothing appears because the next question isn't relevant. But if you are developing some x-rays non-digitally and using silver fixer to do that, then you'll be asked if any silver fixer used in developing x-rays is disposed of down the drain. So that's an example of another heavy metal that we want to minimize to the extent possible to the sewer system to prevent heavy metals from getting into the environment after they pass through the treatment plant. And so we would still give you some recommendations. If you said, yes, I'm sending silver fixer down the drain, then those will be bundled into your recommendations. Same deal for medications. You can see how if I select yes, medications are kept on hand in this clinic, I'll get some questions about how the expired meds are disposed of. For the sake of this example, I'm just going to say no. And then we're just asking informationally about silver diamine fluoride. This is something that we're becoming more familiar with. We at the district don't know all that much about it. And so this is just informational to let us know the scope of its use and whether any excess silver diamine fluoride is being disposed of down the drain. You'll be asked then in just one question to certify that you're following the documentation requirements that are part of both the local MMSD regulations and the federal EPA regulations. And so finally, based on your responses to all those previous questions, there will be a follow-up actions page that lists out any actions that you're required or recommended to take to keep pollutants out of the drain. So this first section will be specifically related to the local requirements for amalgam management and cross-referencing the Wisconsin Dental Association's best management practices. And so these are tied to your mercury compliance. So these are important to prioritize and address if you have anything under this section. And so you can see that I selected that we're using a line cleaner in our vacuum lines that has a pH below 6 or over 8. That is outside of the range that's required by the EPA rule to be protective of your amalgam separator and to prevent amalgam from making it through into the sewer system. And so I have a recommendation here, or a follow-up action, to change the line cleaner used in the vacuum lines. And so after you complete that, you should contact me at MMSD to verify that you've completed those actions within a reasonable time frame. And then you'll also get some recommendations under other actions. And so just to clarify for you in the form that these are not related to your mercury requirements. So these aren't specifically outlined as a regulation for your clinic, but we still strongly encourage you to follow these practices to be protective of the sewer system and the environment. So you'll remember that I selected that we do put in this test example, use silver fixture down the drain. And this tells me it shouldn't go down the drain. It should be captured and disposed of with the metal recycler. And these recommendations just appear on this page in this survey. And so don't worry about accessing or saving this screen, because we'll send you a summary of your report that includes your answers as well as any follow-up actions or recommendations. And so you'll have that for a more enduring reference rather than having to capture exactly what's on this screen. So you'll have that for your documentation, and it's kind of this trail for, I got this required corrective action based on my certification, and I addressed that. So you have that paper or electronic documentation that you address that practice. And so you can see I'm almost done. I get to a certification page where I sign off that the responses in this form are current, complete, and accurate to the best of my knowledge. And I would put down the date that I completed this form. So if I think of anything else, if I realize, oh, I didn't actually check on something and now I have a different answer, I can go back to whatever answer I need to change. And then just press next to get back to the certification screen once I've made any corrections or changes. And once you're happy with all your responses and you're ready to submit that, you just press the submit button. So it'll take a couple seconds, and then you'll know that that data has been submitted when you get this screen that says your data was sent successfully. So again, you will get a report after you submit this survey. So right now, all that information has gone into the database. So it's not accessible to you anymore after you've pressed submit. But you will get a report that gives you that readout of your responses. And so you can verify that you answered things correctly, and you can have that record, like I said, of any recommended follow-up actions. If you need any refreshers or introduction to any of these concepts, I would encourage you to bookmark or know how to access the Pollution Prevention for Dental Clinics webpage that's on the Sewers District's website. So if you go to Programs, Initiatives, Mercury, there's a little module here that says Dental Clinic Resources in the top right. And so you can access the Pollution Prevention for Dental Clinics page from that Mercury page. And this has several resources that can help you with your compliance. So including the certification forms for the EPA, a summary of the practices that you're expected to follow or recommended to follow, a link to the WDA best management practices, an overview of the EPA dental amalgam rule that came out a few years ago. And then more recently, we have these training resources for clinic staff. And so if you are new to amalgam compliance, or if you want a refresher on the why and how of filling out this report and following these practices, you can watch one of these recorded training modules on YouTube. And you can always contact me. So in addition to following up from your certification with any changes that you made based on the required or recommended follow-up actions, you can contact me with any questions, comments, anything that's going to help make this program work better for you too, or make the form work better for you. We're open to your feedback. And so my information, my coworkers' information is on this website, and you can also just access contacts on the MMSD page if you need to get in touch with anybody else here. So thank you again for your dedication to keeping mercury out of the sewer system and for filling out this annual certification form. So this is important. This is something that helps us keep tabs on mercury in the sewer system and keep as much mercury as possible out of the drain, which helps us keep as much mercury as possible out of the environment, off of farm fields, out of our waters. So appreciate your work, and let me know if you have any questions.